I'm Norman, Julia's father, and as of a short while ago, Bob's father-in-law. On behalf of myself, my wife Patty, and John and Caroline Wright, I welcome you to the celebration of the marriage of our children, Julia and Robert. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you over the next, little bit. And I'll also remember that a beautiful meal and festivities await us all. Patty and I have 3 daughters, Emily, Julia, and Lauren. And today, I get to be father of the bride for the second time. For Emily and TJ's wedding, I had the opportunity to learn a new language, Tagalog, that's spoken in the Philippines. For today, though, I didn't have to learn a new language because we, in fact, lived in Chicago for a year when I was doing my laryngology fellowship. And most of Julia's first year of life, we lived in Chicago. So it gave me the chance to learn a little Chicagoan language. Things like, "Hey, Doc, it's my throat. My throat hurts. It started when I was watching the Bears." Or if I shake your hand later this evening and I just happen to have a $100 bill taped to my palm, you'll know I'm just trying to influence the conversation a little bit, Chicago style. In all sincerity, though, I can tell you that being father of the bride is an incredible day. A day full of big events and small but incredibly meaningful moments, friends, and family. Thank you all for being here and celebrating with us today. Today is made special in part by your presence. I'd also like to thank Victor O'Halloran, who officiated so beautifully at today's ceremony. Thank you, Victor. This grand old building was built in 1902, and it was originally as a clubhouse for the 20th Century Club, a women's social club. It's had many names over the years and has undergone a variety of renovations. In 1997, all of its 5 million pounds were lifted from the original foundation and moved 5 blocks to this current location in order to avoid demolition with the building of the new Comerica Park for the Detroit Tigers. It is, in fact, in the Guinness Book of World Records for the magnitude of that move. Now, I tell you that because, I think it's kind of a cool story, and more importantly, because the theme for my remarks tonight is journeys, unique paths, doing it your way, the road less traveled, if you will, and all the good that comes of such things. Julia announced her intention to be her own person and to do it her way, literally, on the day she was born. It was early on a weekend morning in St. Louis during my chief resident year, and Patty and I were having the luxury of sleeping in past 6 a.m. Patty said she didn't feel quite right and was going out to the sofa, which was followed a very short time later by, "Norm, I need you." Well, it wasn't the planned time or place for Julia to be born, and yet it was clear that something dramatic was happening. Patty and I looked each other in the eyes, and we asked, shall we do this here or try to get to the hospital? We decided to make a run for it, and we called our neighbor to come and stay with Emily, who was asleep in her crib, and I carried Patty, wrapped in my robe, out to our car for a high-speed and animated ride to the ER at Barnes Hospital, where I worked. I did manage to grab the video camera on my way out the door, but I regret that I did not turn it on to record the audio of that drive to the hospital. It would be priceless. We two-wheeled it into the ER driveway, and they came out with a wheelchair, and we both yelled out the window, "No, stretcher!" And Julia was born moments later in trauma room number 1 at Barnes Hospital, a place I had been many times as a surgical resident, but never before for the birth of our child. Julia thus dispensed with any sense of usual and announced herself to the world in her own special way. Julia's had a variety of nicknames over the years. Some of them are not exactly intuitive. Julia became Julia Boolia, and that kind of makes sense for a little girl, right? And Boolia became Bools, which became Boolsarama, which became Ramalama, which became Rams, which became the Rammer. It's so funny that it was quite usual to say things like, "Hey, Rams, come here," or "Is the Rammer home from school yet?" My current nickname, which fits our beautiful daughter, and now also Bob's wife, is simply Jules. People have always gravitated to Julia. She gives off a welcoming vibe. One thing that stands out was New Year's Eve 2010, when we as a family completed a bucket list item, and we did the Times Square countdown. Julia just struck up a conversation with a group of guys from Australia who were standing next to us waiting for the ball to drop. I'm thinking they were all about 10 years older than Julia, but hey, Julia's a people person, not to mention gorgeous and smart. And Patty didn't mind the handsome Aussies hanging out with us for a few hours anyway. Julia's always had a great eye for fashion and style as well, and has been the designated hitter when it comes to fashion questions or for doing her mother's and sister's makeup or hair. Julia was a round peg being raised in a pretty darn square family. And at times, this required her to create her own path. And pioneers traveled difficult, unpaved, and sometimes lonely roads. Julia has taught me and each of us so much. And she made us laugh or lighten up sometimes when we needed it, but didn't know it. Thank you for this, Jules, and for helping us find our way together. She shaped a remarkably rich and diverse academic and professional journey which bridges information technology, management, social work, and fashion. I'm thinking there are not many people who can honestly say they've waitressed at a sushi restaurant, sold expensive lingerie at Victoria's Secret, helped design and launch the McDonald's app in China, completed social work internships at a homeless shelter in Chicago and the Cook County Courthouse, and sold high-end leather goods. I'm excited to see how Julia leverages her academic background, incredible intellect, people skills, and eye for fashion in her current work with Coach. At a time when travel and human contact were literally forbidden, Julia and Bob's unique journeys brought them together. They met during an ongoing pandemic. I believe that says powerful things about the fact that this was meant to be. We met Bob for the first time at the wedding of a good friend's daughter, Jessica Hervey, who's here tonight. Thanks, Jess. Julia knew pretty quickly that Bob was the one. Patty and I said, "We like him. He seems nice. But hey, give us a minute to get to know him." You know, we're parents, right? And for about the past year and a half, we've done just that. Most of all, Patty and I have been struck by how thoughtful, sincere, and kind Bob is, and how much he loves Julia. I've heard him say many times and in multiple ways how important she has become in his life. This is beautiful. Bob is a deep thinker, and I completely get that this can both be a wonderful thing and can also complicate your road through life. Bob and I had a very meaningful and memorable conversation last year when he phoned me, and we discussed how we felt about Julia and the meaning and significance of marriage. We've learned a bit about Bob's journey and his unique path. Some of you know quite well already that he is a very accomplished artist. He is modest about this, and I encourage you to seek out opportunities to view some of his drawings and to let him discuss the meaning of what you see. Bob has sometimes said how happy he is to have made it through the journey that was his 20s. And I think how valuable these life experiences must be in shaping your path and character and future. Bob has leveraged his talents as an artist, his meticulous eye for detail, and his management and people skills into the high-tech world of precision timepieces. Patty and I are enthusiastic about seeing him grow in this arena. Patty and my gift to Bob upon his opening of the new Breitling watch store at Somerset, subtle father-in-law marketing moment there. The holidays are approaching. Our gift to Bob was a book titled Longitude. It's a story of how an incredibly challenging and important problem, determining a ship's longitude at sea, was finally solved in the 18th century with the development of a timepiece that remained highly accurate when on board a ship, the marine chronometer. Which is a great segue as I come back to my theme of doing it your way, creating your path, and the road less traveled. I've come to believe that although they did not realize it until they actually met, I believe that Julia and Bob have been on a journey to find each other, and today we wholeheartedly celebrate this. Outstanding. One more thing before I propose a toast to the bride and groom. I'd like to pause for a moment and remember those who are here in spirit with Julia and Bob tonight. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, and others. We feel and embrace your presence. And now I'd like to propose a toast to the bride and groom. Julia and Bob, may your life journey together as a married couple be all that you wish it to be. Cheers. Cheers. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wedding feast and for those who have prepared it for us. We thank you for all those here present tonight. We thank you most of all for this young couple, Julia and Bob, whose union we celebrate this evening. Please watch over and guide them and each of us as we navigate the days and years ahead. Amen.
We are Julia's older and younger sister, Emily and Lauren.
And I have to take this moment to make a Julia found her Mr. Right joke, which hasn't been made yet. And Lauren really hates me for it, but I think this is important to say. So.
From a pretty young age, Julia has always claimed she was the most normal child in our family. And our desire to follow every rule was not typical of children our age. She highlighted how wanting to hang out with friends and attending parties was actually quite typical, and our desire to stay home was not. It took until college for me to realize, holy crap, Julia was right. While I'm sure it was difficult for Jules to be stuck between two squares, our family would not be the same without her. I've always admired how Julia appeared carefree while we were growing up. But over time, I realized that Julia was in fact not carefree. Jules cares about everyone and everything with a passion and determination that's even more admirable than a carefree gal could ever be. I had no idea at the time, but as her baby sister, I benefited from this uncapped, fierce love for others our whole childhood and now into adulthood. Whether she was saving me from the high school security guard questioning my elevator pass, which I did have permission to use, by the way, or subtweeting some mean high school girls on my behalf, or saving me from monsters under the bed by letting me sleep with her until 5th grade. Julia has always been there for me. I am sure all of the people who surround Julia feel this same love too.
So, this fierceness we reference extends to all areas of her life, including her fashion sense, which this grateful recipient of her hand-me-downs is very appreciative of. Her fashion sense and so many other wonderful things that we love about Julia. And while we and our father could talk about how special Julia is all night, there is another important character in this story. Enter Bob. My first meeting with Bob was a chance encounter on Southport outside the Doc Martens store one evening when Julia was meeting him after work. And from that first moment, I noticed that Julia had a different smile and comfort around her Mr. Right. He was introduced to our immediate family, as you all heard, at a wedding a few weeks later. And from that first weekend and across the year and more, and these many family gatherings, it's become clear that Bob fulfills and exceeds the requirements for joining the family.
One requirement would be the ability to hold one's own throughout the large family gatherings, like a Battelle family Christmas. Last Christmas, Bob proved that he excels at this. Not only did he genuinely engage with and get to know the oodles and oodles of relatives, he also pulled off a beautiful Christmas tree side proposal which made Aunt Sandy cry. Another requirement of joining the family.
Another lesser known but no less important requirement is the ability to handle and embrace Hogikian family quirks. There are many wonderful things that we share and also some shared challenges. One shared challenge is our sweaty hands. So, we've tried every product on the market. Let us know if you have any other suggestions. Nothing works. This microphone is very moist. So, Thursday night at the rehearsal, as with many momentous occasions in our lives, Julia's hands were quite sweaty. As she visibly fretted about her visibly sweaty hands, Bob took them in his and said, "Here, wipe them on mine." So, A+ gold star, well done. Another requirement, well fulfilled.
I have to go off script and say, I do not have the sweaty hand gene, and I am okay with that. Sorry. My hands are dry. Next, you really have to prove that you care. Bob had clearly shown this to Julia in their time together. And over the past year, we have also seen him go above and beyond in his cares and love for Julia and the whole family. From long conversations with our parents during our first weekend together to his genuine interest in each one of us, Bob has continued to show up and show his dedication to becoming part of the family. It is really remarkable.
So please raise a glass, which I don't have, sorry. To the Hogikian Wrights. May they continue to fiercely love, honor, and protect one another as they embark on their journey together as husband and wife. We love you so much. Congratulations.
First off, I would just like to thank the Hogikian and Wright families for putting together this lovely celebration and making us from out of town feel so welcome here in Detroit. In all honesty, when you asked me to be your best man, I've been dreading putting together this speech. Not because I don't feel honored to give it, which I do, but because I knew how difficult it would be to put into words how much an over 2-decade-long friendship has meant to me. There are several stories that I could tell. For starters, I could talk about how we battled it out on the sandlots of John Humphrey Field playing OIA Little League Baseball together. Or I could talk about how we both played guitar growing up, and we tried to make our way through the entire Weezer songbook. But neither of us can really sing, so that's why we're not really famous today. Or I could talk about how we were both deathly afraid of our middle school English teacher, Miss Ladding. And despite our best efforts to stay out of trouble in that class, we always managed to get in trouble. But yes, also I could talk about the awkwardness of finding one's own personal style in high school. And you grew out of that awkwardness maybe a little bit more quickly than I did, but it wasn't without a stop looking like a knockoff Kurt Cobain for a minute there. All the so yeah, sorry. So these are all great stories, but my favorite would be the time that you got into a fight outside the Rainbow Club. So there was a discussion about you in your 20s, and this would have happened probably in our mid-20s. It was a weekend night, like most nights that we would share together. I took the Blue Line a couple stops down to Wicker Park, and we were hanging out, having a few old styles, watching Seinfeld reruns, hanging out with Mugwug. Those moments hanging out, kind of just the two of us, watching shows or new stand-up specials, something like that, are some of the most cherished memories that I have. But this particular night, after we were done watching these shows, and we decided that we would strike out for the evening, we went down to the Rainbow Club, which is walkable from your old apartment in Wicker Park, and we were stopped at Damon and Division, and the light head was red, so we couldn't cross, and I'm just standing there, we're standing there waiting for the light to change. And out of nowhere, you just started getting into an argument with somebody else who was also waiting. I don't know what started the argument or why it started, but before I knew it, you were both grappling each other. And I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be a fight. And you talk a big game about Jeet Kune Do and martial arts, so I'm expecting some like Bruce Lee level stuff. But before I knew it, it was devolved to just two grown men rolling around on the pavement. And at this point, I'm thinking I should probably do something about this before someone hits their head on the pavement or CPD rolls by and arrests you. But why is this story emblematic of what I think our friendship is? Because the phrase, I'm a lover, not a fighter, comes to mind. And in this instance, you were definitely not a fighter. There was, you held your own, but it wasn't anything good. But so that is part of your character, and you're definitely more of a lover, and it's something that I've experienced my whole entire life. You are caring, you're empathetic, you're always there to lend an ear, and I'm so glad that you found a partner in Julia who exemplifies the same qualities that you do. And while you have left Chicago now at this point, and I cherish those memories that we've had together, I'm so glad that you get to start this new chapter of your life with Julia. So I don't really know I had an idea of how to end this. It's not as good as the Rilke quotes that I heard earlier today. But when I was preparing this speech, I looked back at a bunch of our old yearbooks. So I found one from a note that you wrote me from our freshman year. So this would have been 2003. There was also a comment about your artwork. I have some of that as well. It might be kind of hard for everybody to see, but you can come find me in the bar afterwards if you'd like to see it. It is rated G, so everybody can see it. But yeah, so you could take a look at that. So the note that you wrote me, Mike, this is Bob. In case I was wondering, the date today is August 8th, 2003. I just drew that cartoon, and you are currently with Holly Frazzini, who was my then girlfriend. You wrote under her passage too, which I don't really understand. She took up like the whole page, and you like kind of fit it in at the bottom. That's weird. Keep something sacred, please. Okay. I digress. I wrote that as a random memory you can look back on when you bust out the old time capsule. My regards to the wife and kids. So, me personally, still working on the wife and kids thing, but you two are well on your way. So, if you could all raise a glass and share while I give my regards to Bob and Julia. Congratulations.
All right, so I was just told. We didn't tell him. Yeah, they didn't tell me. I'm going to prove something that I've known my entire life, and that's I'm a horrible public speaker. So, as my face turns red, somebody catch me. But I guess I've known my brother a long time. Since '88. Yeah, '88. Yeah, good year. That was when I got my first Nintendo, actually. I liked you Super Mario better at first. He was more interesting. But one of the things I can say about my brother is that he's unique. Him and I are very different in a lot of ways, but we're also very similar in a lot of ways. And I've watched how he's treated my daughters, one of whom isn't here tonight, but Parker. And I've just seen we have a weird age gap, and I lost touch with him, and I regret a lot of that because it's my fault. I was older, and to me, he was a dork for a long time, just because that's how older brothers are. But our relationship has gotten better in the last few years, and I didn't really connect with any of his friends who I don't know many of you tonight. I saw Mike, I think the last time we were talking about it last night, 8 years ago, and then one day he shows up with Jules, and I'm like, what's going on here? And he's like, he introduced her as his friend at first, then a month later it was his girlfriend, and then a month later they were engaged. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But it didn't surprise me. Jules, you're amazing. My brother outkicked his coverage, I have to say that. But immediately, Jules is one of the family. She gets us. We're all strange people. But I would just like to say congratulations, you guys. This has been amazing, and it actually didn't come as a surprise to anybody. I think it was the month after you guys said you were dating, my wife said they're getting married. So it was no surprise. Sometimes it just works, but I love you guys, and thank you for making this incredibly awkward for me. So.